Isn't anyone going to thank me?
This is our podcast.
Don't you get it? This is Something Who. It's the same podcast as the celebrity ones. And we're on a video call. I love a video call.
What is this thing? It's bigger. It's bigger on the inside. Who the hell are you?
You brought us back.
Just think, though. Chris Chapman, Toby Haydock, Stephen Shapansky from Radio Free Skaro. We're all in the same club now.
But we're supposed to be nobodies.
Not anymore.
But think of Something Who. The podcast it's supposed to become might never exist now.
Nah. Special guests bring more listeners to our regular episodes. Different people, but the podcast's the same.
You can't know that. And if this podcast changes, the whole of fandom could change. The future of Doctor Who podcasts. No one should have that much power.
Tough.
You should have left us where we were, anonymous.
Simon, I've done this sort of thing before. In small ways. Showcased some little people, but never anyone as important as this. Oh, I'm good.
Little people? What, like me, Simon and Giles? Who decides we're so unimportant? You?
For a long time now, I thought I was just a trier. But I'm not. I'm the winner. That's who I am. The podcaster victorious.
And there's no one to stop you.
No.
This is just wrong, Richard.
That's for me to decide. Now, we'd better start recording. Oh, Audacity's all locked up. Still, that's easy. There we go. Recording again.
Is there nothing you can't do?
Not anymore.
I don't care who you are. The podcaster victorious is wrong. I'm out.
This isn't what I signed up for. Goodbye.
I'm off too. There are other podcasts.
Oh dear. I've gone too far. Is this it? The death of Something Who? Hello and welcome to Something Who, episode 21. If you found us through our special episodes with Chris Chapman, Toby Haydock or Stephen Shapansky, this is our classic format where we compare a Doctor Who story from the original series and one from the new. This time it's a virus special with 1977's Invisible Enemy and 2009's Waters of Mars. So, hello Simon.
Hello Richard. Hello everyone.
Hello Giles.
Hello everybody.
And also, star of the new Missing Episodes podcast, hello Paul.
Good evening.
It's so good you're able to join us.
Yes, I'm still in black and white, I'm afraid. I've got to change the settings after the other week, but fun to let it put you off.
So everyone, the Invisible Enemy. Was it a prawn cracker, or was it something you didn't really want on?
Boomtish.
Oh dear. Oh. Yeah, who wants to go first and give us their initial thoughts on Invisible Enemy?
It's always tricky. It's always tricky looking back at these stories. Do you look at them again with the wonder you had when you watched them the first time? I watched. I'm going to delight everyone now and take lots of flack away from Richard. I watched this when I was 10 originally, and I loved all Doctor Who stories. I loved all Doctor Who stories with space and the special effects, and this one even had laser beams as well. So at last it made a quantum leap forward, and then unfortunately along came Star Wars a few months later, and that changed Doctor Who and pretty much everything else ever after that. This felt a bit strange. I remembered something I thought that was in it that wasn't, and then there were a few other things that I didn't remember seeing at all that were actually in it. So I remember the opening scenes in that space shuttle on its way to Titan, and I thought they had lightning effects coming out of the control panel into the eyes of the crew. and infecting them.
Mm-hmm.
And then, horror of horrors, I didn't remember at all that Leela actually piloted the TARDIS, apparently, although we never see it, from Titan to the med base on the asteroid. So all sorts of eye-openers in this story for me, Richard.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, so hitherto unexpected talent for Leela there.
I think her character was up in the air quite a bit, really, wasn't it, in this series? Because Robert Holmes and Hinchcliffe had this grand plan to make her the space Eliza Doolittle and gradually civilise her, in inverted commas, week by week. And it seems that Graham Williams didn't really have much interest in that. And although the only obvious sign is that he put her back in her original costume, I think some of that uncertainty carried on in the stories, didn't it?
Mm.
It's a bit contradictory, given that we get that lovely little bit of business near the start with her her writing her name on the blackboard.
Yes.
And stuff like that is clearly alluding to it. And Bob Holmes was officially still script editor at this point, wasn't he? It's his name on the credits, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, yeah, that's a bit of a jolt that she suddenly has the ability to pilot the TARDIS.
But that's Doctor Who for you. That's sometimes the plot calls to the people to be able to do things, and you just have to squint and let them get on with it.
Well, it's especially true with Baker and Martin, isn't it? I mean, anything can happen when they're on board.
And yeah, absolutely. I've got a very soft spot for this one. I think I don't know why. It had a great impression on my 7-year-old self. In as much as I can remember typing up vast screeds of the dialogue from memory, pretty much.
Wow.
The TARDIS, the I hope he's TARDIS trained thing, and it was in particular obviously stuck in my mind massively. And the whole thing, trying to mount a small Amdram production by bullying various members of my family into playing the other parts.
Oh, you too?
Yeah, probably, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I was a couple of years before that, but yes, I had a similar thing, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, so this one stuck in my memory, and probably it is, as Simon said, that combination of that spaciness and so on that was quite appealing to my 7-year-old self. I'm not sure whether it's the bits that really stand up today, but yeah, we'll come on to that. But I've still got a soft spot for it.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that. I've always had a soft spot for this one. I know I would have watched it at the time, but I don't have any strong memories, which is odd considering it's got some very interesting visuals. I've got very strong memories of Horror of Fang Rock and Image of the Fendal, but I think it was quite a good era for visuals, wasn't it? I think it's one of, for me, even though it's got such a bad reputation, it's one of Baker and Martin's more successful stories, and I know it suffers from some of the same problems that they've overreached themselves, which they often do. From one end of the 70s to the other, they never seem to learn quite what's possible on a Doctor Who budget, but never stop trying. And again, you mentioned Star Wars earlier. It's often said that this is Doctor Who's answer to Star Wars, K9's Doctor Who's answer to R2-D2, but there's not much chance that there was any direct influence, is there?
No.
It must have just been something in the air at the time.
If it was a direct influence, I'm sure they'd have tried a lot harder with certain aspects of it. If they'd have caught chunks of medical base falling off the wall barely before K9 shot it, and people's trousers splitting in fights and things like that. I spotted.
Does that happen here as well? That's amazing. I thought that was. I thought we had to wait till Horns of Nymon for that.
Well, the falling off the wall.
I like this story as well, but again, it's seeing it again with grown up eyes, and then comparing it with everything you've seen since then. And sometimes they get away with small miracles with Doctor Who with the budgets and some bit of ropey story. And this one had a very strong story, but as ever, just as Paul said, Baker and Martin overreached themselves, unfortunately, and there's some quite big jumps in the story sometimes, such as the TARDIS getting from Titan to the medical base, and then poor old K9 being unable to get over the step into the TARDIS and things like that. Yeah, and also showing Richard's prawn in full profile instead of just using angles as well. That didn't do it any favours either.
Well, I'm sure there'll be more to be said about the Prawn, but
Yeah.
that's...
Plenty.
I mean, goodness me, it's a large and distinguished, not particularly exclusive club. The world of Doctor Who stories which are let down primarily by their monster. Yes, I don't know. It's one of the oddest costumes ever. So it's an odd decision on paper to make it look like a prawn.
Yeah.
And they must have had plenty of time to realise how immobile the thing was. So that it has to be supported as it's shuffling slowly through the corridor.
It's interesting because just on that topic, and also on the topic of nostalgia. Before I wanted to ask Richard what he thought of it, but part of my nostalgia for it was having the Target paperback and reading it exhaustively again and again and again. For some reason, that one, even though it's a typical Tennant's 126-page, maybe not even that, maybe 110-page potboiler, just again stuck with me, and I absorbed it. And the jacket of that, of course, has got the prawn, but the prawn manages to look sinister and because it's got that muddy brown background, and it manages to make it look rather better than it ever does on screen.
That is so true.
And the one bit where you expect the prawn to, rewatching it, I was completely thrown by the fact that when they actually meet it inside the Doctor's mind, inside his brain, it's that weird little, pupating thing with a single pincer sticking out of it, and you never actually see that. You never actually see the prawn in that murky.
No, you don't.
Murky kind of, in a well lit environment.
I'm just looking at the cover now, and you're right. You're mostly right that it does look a lot more sinister and intimidating in the murky background of the picture looming over Tom Baker. But if you have another look, it also has a rather goofy expression. It looks like it's cross-eyed. It looks like it's a drunk prawn staggering around in an alleyway at 3 a.m. Don't all rush off and look at it now, but you'll thank me later.
Of course, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah. So I came to this.
But yes, Richard.
On this time round on a large wave of nostalgia. I picked up Doctor Who Monthly 550 with its 1976 theme. So it's based around the season one before this, but it's talking about Tom Baker and Louise Jameson. So it's got the same kind of vibe to it. And it's an absolutely beautiful piece of work. I mean, the replica Weetabix cards, the poster mag. I had those 2 poster mags that I bought at the Doctor Who exhibition in Blackpool, either that year or the year before. So I know exactly what they were going for with that fold out, and the magazine itself has some rather nice features in it. And I mean, I can't say that I loved this story when I saw it first off. I was probably about 10 when it was on, just before, maybe 9 coming on 10, and maybe it seemed a bit silly to me at the time. But actually watching it now, I quite enjoyed it, really. The first episode I thought was a little bit on the dull side, but the rest of it I thought was quite nice, and it moved at a good pace, and I was positively impressed by it this time round.
Well, that's nice to know. It's always nice to be able to look back on our 10-year-old selves and say you didn't know what the hell you were doing, taking everything so seriously.
Yeah, indeed.
You just wait. A few decades will pass, and you'll have given up. You'll have lowered your standards further than you ever thought possible.
Yes.
No, I think you're right. I think the pacing is probably what I like. It does. It's a proper. What is it? It's a proper Doctor Who B movie, and Doctor Who often accidentally does Doctor Who B movie, just by virtue of not being very good. But here it's ripping off a B movie. Don't write in if you're going to tell me that Fantastic Voyage wasn't a B movie. You know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's tonally.
Yeah.
It's going for that, and within Doctor's usual limits, it's achieving it. I mean, it's achieving some of the harder to pull off aspects, such as the main conceit being shrunken and put inside the Doctor's bloodstream. All that looks pretty good.
It does.
It's nice matte paintings and CSO combined. It's certainly a much more it's more effective, but it's a better use of CSO than Underworld, for example.
Yeah,
if you're going to go to all that trouble of recording whole episodes on blue screen, you might as well make it somewhere completely fantastical you couldn't possibly build for real than make it a cave, which would have looked better and probably been cheaper. And but anyway, it moves around. There's lots of locations. There's a nice big colourful character. I think I complained last time we discussed a Baker and Martin story that there's always a place in their stories for a sort of comedy guest character who never quite came to life. I think in the Three Doctors I was particularly scathing about that. Yeah. But here, Professor Marius as well, we get a very nice performance which helps, but he's a nice, memorable guest character in among all the usual science fiction tropes. And K9 as an idea is genius.
I do wonder whether that's the Holmes influence, whether Bob Holmes is leaning over their shoulders and tweaking some of the dialogue and just making it sing a bit more in places.
Yes, I mean, it's entirely possible. I mean, he didn't do that in every one of their stories. He didn't really add much to Hand of Fear. That's another one where...
That was exactly the counterexample I was thinking of, actually.
So maybe there's the truth is in the middle somewhere, which is that if he sees the germ of a good idea in a particular character, he'll write it up, like with Marius. And if there is nothing, Hand of Fear is just Claws of Axos, but without anyone even as interesting as Bill Filer, the CIA agent.
Yes, yeah.
And in brackets, I like Hand of Fear. The hand stuff saves it. So, but you know what I mean. I'm coming from the angle of character and dialogue rather than visual spectacle. You need a bit of both. This is another story with Michael Sheard in it, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know why it took me so long to get those words out. I was actually trying to count where we were in his 6 or 7 appearances. We're well over halfway through.
This is number 4, maybe.
Always reliable. Oh yes, of course. Castrovalva and Dalek Remembrance after that.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, this is probably his best part, isn't it? I mean, a lot of the other ones are quite small in the story that they're in.
I guess it's the biggest, isn't it?
And he gets to play 2 different parts, I suppose, from the initial one and then the taken over one.
And he pulls off a similar contrast as he does with the headmaster in Remembrance. Reliable old Michael Sheard.
Yes.
The phonetic spelling thing I quite liked, but I almost missed. I mean, it's funny they don't really feature it, do they? I mean, it's everywhere, but it's in quite small typeface, and if you blink, you miss it. And I don't think I noticed it the first time it went out. When I was 10, I suppose. But this time, I saw. Oh yeah, I see information and whatever it was in kind of weird phonetic type. But
Section 7.
Yes.
Yeah.
But as I say, you've got to be concentrating to see it.
It's strange that from the visuals of this story in general, because it's a Barry Newbury gig, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's the stuff the stuff inside the Doctor's head is great. The design work there in general seems to come off really well. I don't know. I mean, you can see what they were getting at with the. I think the Titan base is weak, and you can see where they're going. You can see why the Baal Foundation looks as it does. I think possibly the damning thing about that is just that it feels like it's the forerunner of an awful lot of very sterile clinical sets that we're going to get over the next few years of Williams and JNT, without the justification. Whereas in this case, okay, you're going for a hospital look, and it then feels like do they then just keep reusing the same flats again and again?
Oh, is this the story where? Right, I'm now going to have to admit, has this story got those those triangular thingies in the background? Is this where they make their debut?
I don't recall any triangular thingies.
Oh, okay. The famous bit of set that they reuse again and again in Doctor and Blake 7 and the Adventure Game for the rest of time. If it's not the Invisible Enemy, then it's another one in this series.
It may well be I wasn't looking.
Okay. Well, make a note of the time, Richard, because you'll need to cut that last minute.
What I did notice...
We'll save it in the edit.
What I did notice was that the receptionist had obviously been well provided with PPE. She had her gloves and her mask at the Vial Foundation.
Yes.
She wasn't going to get infected by anything that came in.
No.
Oh yes, of course. We haven't really talked much
Yeah,
about
sure.
our linking gimmick. Although, as it's in rather poor taste, perhaps we shouldn't.
Well, as we've kind of noted with the nucleus of the swarm, it seems like it's a virus when it suits them, and then it isn't when it doesn't really. It doesn't necessarily have all of the features of a virus.
Well, some of the finest brains, even nowadays, still get confused over the precise definition of a virus. Have you seen Donald Trump? I mean, even he, and he's a genius on these matters, thinks that you can combat a virus with antibacterial soap. I'm looking at pictures of the set in the story, trying to spot the particular bit of set dressing that I'm wittering on about, and I can't find it yet. Maybe it was the Sunmakers.
Simon, help us out.
Can we make this a regular theme? A regular.
How can I assist you, Richard?
What do you think of the whole virus theme? Does it work for you? Does it kind of make sense?
It was going. Again, I think it's a good story overall. It rather you got to. Why did they have to make the virus giant size? That sort of spoilt it slightly. I don't know why they had to do that. I mean, it could have remained super. It was like the Great Intelligence almost. It was sort of shapeless and formless and directing everything nicely. And then suddenly it was wobbling around like a drunk clanger, and they were having to get it, trying to work out a plot device to get it to tighten. And
Doctor Who producers throughout history have been telling the writers, stick a monster in, come on, it's all very well, but we need a big visible monster. And Baker and Martin make this mistake over and over again. I mean, in Hand of Fear, well, it's not quite the same mistake, but I mean, turning Eldrad into a big, he's quite a subtle character for the first 3 episodes, and turning her into a big booming Stephen Thorne at the end is completely unnecessary. But it just, they must have this switch in their brains saying, no, it needs a 7-foot-tall male actor, or a prawn, I suppose. I mean,
And there was a frog in Claws of Axos as well, wasn't there? Giant frog.
True. Yeah, so I mean, what I quite like about the whole virus thing is that it kind of foreshadows the whole computer virus thing by about 20 years, in that they're actually it takes over K9 at one point. It also seems to be in some of the systems. So they describe it as a noetic or mental virus. It's not necessarily anything that we're expecting to encounter, but it does seem to also take over technology.
Well, that almost makes up for them being 2,000 years late with cloning, doesn't it? And still using hypodermic syringes and needles.
Although this kilt-vacuum technique bears no relation to any kind of cloning that for some reason it can clone you with clothes intact, and also you retain some weird link to the person you've been cloned from.
Yeah, I mean, science isn't their strong point, I'd say, with Baker and Martin. We've already gone into with the 3 Doctors, the whole black hole thing, and I'm sure you were reasonably happy with the nuclear reactor in Claws of Axos, but I mean, some things are good and some things aren't, I suppose.
Once again, though, actually, they've obviously been at least leafing through the pages of their scientific journals because we've got the fact that Titan has a methane atmosphere.
Oh yes, that's true.
Which was fairly fresh information, I think, at the time, and this was before we'd had a flyby. So it's not a bad one. It looks the Titan base and stuff. It looks very like some of this Chesley Bonestell space art from the 50s. All this stuff that was done to. That really kind of sold Americans on the vision of what the space race was going to look like. So it's quite nice from that point of view. And they weren't to know that when we got to Titan, it was going to have this murky orange atmosphere everywhere. But
did they destroy just the base at the end, or did they utterly blow Titan out of the sky? Yeah,
it's not entirely clear, is it?
It sounds like they nuked the entire atmosphere, but I don't think they had enough oxygen on the in the tanks to have blown the whole
It's a relatively
blown the whole
large
lot.
moon, isn't it, Tyson?
It's huge, yeah.
No, it's huge. Yes, yeah, yeah. So eventually you'd run out of methane to. You'd run out of oxygen to burn with the methane.
Yeah.
I liked the journey inside the Doctor in episode 3. I thought episode 3 was the strongest one. And I thought, just as Paul described, I thought they did that very, very well. But something they always do fantastically well with Doctor is explosions. And if they did blow up Titan in its entirety, or even that base, that was a bit of a damp squib as far as Doctor Who explosions go. That looked like a wet bonfire night to me.
Yeah. I was going to say, before we leave the subject of the realisation of the story, that it's got particularly good model effects, hasn't it?
Yes.
So again, another small, more exclusive club this story is in is stories which have much better model effects than they perhaps deserve, or that are out of proportion to the quality of the sets or the acting, whatever. Again, we're going to get another one just a few stories later with Underworld, which has a very visually impressive episode 1, before it all goes horribly wrong. And if they were so good, I mean, maybe I'm alone here, but I think most people think these are particularly good effects, and it made it slightly bewildering that they chose to redo them all in CGI for the DVD release. And thus it became one of those few stories where they actually made the effects worse, and really shouldn't have wasted their money. I'd say that not in a spirit of criticism, but it was a stupid idea.
I thought the spacecraft and the opening was really, really good. I'm sure that shuttlecraft's been reused in Blake 7, where they're sending Blake off to the prison planet. I'm sure that gets reused.
Yeah, I had a feeling it was.
Was it Ian Scoons?
Yes.
Because, it was the luck of the draw who was doing your effects on Doctor Who, wasn't it? Same as it was with your costumes and your practical sets.
Although it was always Matt Irvin on Swap Shop, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I think a young Matt was helping out on this one as well.
Right.
Oh, this is true.
But yeah, it's interesting. One thing I noticed about this with regard to episode 3, it is very nicely set up. The whole of episode 3 is a very nicely self-contained little thing, and it balances very well, considering that it sets the ticking clock at the end of the previous episode, and you think, oh, hang on, so this is going to be the entire next episode. But because you're cutting back and forth, it actually doesn't seem too implausible that they have they've got 11 minutes or so total, and that plays out over about 22 minutes of screen time, and the fact that they then put the siege sort of thing up against it balances pretty nicely, I think. But the thing that I noticed was that this is rather like the Deadly Assassin, and it has this standalone episode 3 kind of that goes to somewhere completely different. Instead of having the usual episode 3 longueurs, that many stories suffer from. We've got to go on we've just got to pad this out because it's too late to get to the solution. They take it to the idea that you have to go somewhere completely different in order to get the information you need to know for in order to develop what you need for the 4th episode. So I think structurally it's quite nicely done from that point of view.
Yes, I mean, if anything, as I kind of said earlier, it seems to me episode 1's the one that suffers, and the other 3 go along quite nicely, I think. I always struggled as a boy trying to understand that these episodes aren't supposed to play out in real time, and so when you're cutting backwards and forwards, you're sort of going from the point at which you last saw them and you're coming back again, and but yeah, I mean, I see that's what they're doing, because otherwise the timing doesn't make sense.
Very good. Well, I think we can all agree that Invisible Enemy has an episode for everybody, even if few are going to like the whole thing.
I like the fact that Marius goes off to find Lo, because it's nice to see people being thorough about the possibility of infection in a
this
location.
is true.
Yeah, he sort of thinks, haven't we better just check that down and make sure that nothing nasty happens?
Did some proper contact tracing. Yeah.
I was getting something of the same feel about inside the Doctor's brain as Planet of Evil. I mean, it's not as impressive as the Jungle set, but it has some of those same kind of slightly fantastic feels to it.
Yes, yeah. Is that a Barry Newbury job?
No, that's the other guy, isn't it? It's the
Ray Kuzik. Roger Murray Leach.
That's him, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's definitely a similarity there.
Frederick Jaeger was in it as well, wasn't he?
Freddie Jaeger.
Oh, of course, yes, yeah. Turns out in both quite rapidly. Yeah, that was quite a rapid reappearance. Yeah, I was just thinking it was quite interesting to watch. And I'm not sure what the truth is about the whole thing about when K9 was when they decided to keep K9 on, as with all of these companion stories. Whether it really was a late decision, as is claimed, allegedly in order to justify the costs of making the thing in the first place. Seems
they claim that they refilmed the ending like they did with Jamie all those years earlier.
Oh, I don't know about that. But
no,
I don't know. It seems a bit. Yeah, it sounds a bit of a made-up excuse, given that you then, it's not like you get the pop for free. You still have to employ John Leeson every week, so you're still adding an extra cast member. I think you wouldn't do that for the sake of amortising the costs of a robot dog necessarily. But it's interesting just watching K9. I was trying to disengage my brain from the knowledge that yes, he's joining and he will become a fixture of Doctor Who for the next few years, and just thinking he works very nicely just in the context of this story. It does give him a lot to do, and it's very nice to see him nicely worked out as a one-off interesting character.
The only thing that's slightly jarring about K9 and to some extent Leela is that they become sort of a science fiction staple of a gun battle. So as soon as anything gets a bit tough, you sort of send Leela and K9 off to start shooting people. Which I mean, maybe Doctor Who was always a bit like that with Unit and so on. But we always pretend that it wasn't, and that it's all about the Doctor outwitting them with his terribly clever ideas.
Did anyone else notice Tom Baker being grumpy towards Leela? Is that part of the script, or was that Tom Baker being grumpy?
I think the latter. It's not as bad or as obvious as it is in Horror Fang Rock, is it? But well, he won't look at her when he's directing his lines.
No.
Oh dear. What was your favourite monster, Louise Jameson? Tom Baker. Has anyone done any research into what order these stories were recorded in? Because I have this memory that they were out of order.
They are indeed out of order.
I forgot to look it up, but I have the extent of my research is to look at the production code, and assuming that they were recorded in production code order, I think I've been able to recreate the
psychodrama.
So, tell me more, Richard.
Well, I think fundamentally exactly what you're going to say. So say it.
Well, look, if I'm right there, Invisible Enemy is the first one to be recorded.
Yeah.
Which means if K9 hadn't been... K9 was a late-minute addition to the regular cast...
Yeah, they've got Horror of Fang Rock to think about it.
They've had to rewrite everything following it. So the next one, the second story to be recorded is Horror of Fang Rock. So whether or not that was always intended to open the season... I think it must have been because of the contact lens.
It was the vampire thing, wasn't it, originally?
Oh, of course. Is that why it was pushed back? Because they needed the replacement for the vampire story?
Well, plus also it was recorded in Birmingham, so I think the whole thing got mucked up.
Yeah. So we're starting with Invisible Enemy, where late in the day they decided to keep on K9. Then they recorded Horror of Fang Rock, which is before, so it doesn't need to be in it. Then Sunmakers is third, which has quite a large part, but that's written by the script editor Holmes, so he would have been able to adapt his own script at short notice. Then we get Image of the Fendal, recorded fourth, shown third, where K9 hardly features, does he?
Can't remember him much.
Been a while, but no, I don't remember him.
And then for the last couple, Anthony Reid has taken over.
Yeah.
And I guess by that point, there's enough leeway, enough lead time to get K9 in.
It's almost plausible, yeah.
Well, there you go.
Directed by Derek Goodwin. I mean, obviously enjoyed it so much that he never came back.
Yes, quite.
Yes.
Yes, he's not. Yes, he doesn't really make much of an impression, does he? Like quite a number of Williams era directors.
Hmm.
Don't know where he found them.
It's not badly. I don't know. It's not jarringly bad.
No.
Direction. There's a few. There's a few.
It's something
nice...
new to Doctor Who. It's a thankless task to lend them with something like this for their first story, isn't it? I think that's what tends to scupper some people.
Yes, and I think all the and the battles are because there is a lot of zapping and laser fights and so on, which are, and I guess it's a limited to technology of the time that the laser fights happen by virtue of like small lights that come on, and then someone someone points a gun and a blaze of light comes on the person that's been hit, rather than you actively seeing any kind of beam, which is scientifically, for what if you want to play that game, it's probably more credible that's what it would be more like. But it's I think it costs some dynamism to the scenes compared to actually having beams shooting around all over the place. So there's certainly stuff where it's a bit hard to read what exactly is going on, just because you don't know where the beam is coming from and going to.
Yeah.
What happened to the toxin that the Doctor was going to chuck all over the swarm on Titan? One second it was in his hand.
Yeah.
I mean, did Lowe shoot it? That was a sort of jump. I rewatched that a couple of times and I still couldn't fathom what had happened.
No. He had to tell us that he'd lost it, didn't he, later on?
If you think that's bad, you should have seen this story the way I second saw it in the 80s, when it was one of the first things I saw as an off-air Australian recording.
Right.
When a friend of mine at school came into possession of a load of them. And it's all everything you've heard about the way they edit these things to within an inch of their life is true. The cliffhanger, is it episode 1 where Leela throws a knife into somebody's back? It's almost incomprehensible. So between the story being cut to ribbons to take out the most harmless moments of violence and sarcastic commentary from the continuity announcer over the end credits. Good heavens, what a horrible monster. well, and so forth.
She has a...
I thought I'd just chip in with some Australian commentary.
I think it's in the final episode where they're having a gunfight in the common room or something like that on Titan, and 1 second Leela's chucking a knife at someone, and then she suddenly has a gun in her hand from somewhere. I don't normally spot loads and loads of things all the way through a story like that, but there's a lot of things like that where it's just not got picked up by the director and the producers, and that it is a good story. Perhaps it was over ambitious, but there's lots of little naff things like that in it that really should have got picked up that are annoying.
Well,
there you go.
I just wanted to bring up one other thing, which
ever
will
end?
So now, which will actually bridge just in terms of gunfights and things. I just wanted to say, one of the first things that struck me is, why the hell have they got guns? Why the hell have they got a gun in the first place on what's ostensibly a crew ship changing a roster on a where the dialogue is selling us a fairly nuts and bolts approach to space travel, people reaching, trying to reach out and extend across the solar system and so on. It's just like, who are you going to shoot? And that is in fact a point that lo and behold immediately presents itself at the start of Waters of Mars as well, when the Doctor gets a gun pulled on him and you think, why have you bought a gun?
That's a good point. Well made. And the other link, of course, is these are we were craning around for virus-based stories, but these are both set in remote human colonies, aren't they? On desolate rocky worlds.
Yeah. Within the solar system. Yeah.
Within the solar system, yeah. I mean, could they be any more similar?
Yeah. The only thing that Waters and Mars lacks is a prawn that's ready to spawn.
Yeah, and Russell calls himself a fan. You should have known that was the surefire way to success. Well, who wants to start on Waters and Mars?
Okay, well, I'll wade in. Yeah, I enjoyed that. I went into it thinking, I probably haven't watched it since broadcasts again, and yeah, it was interesting because I went into it and started off thinking, okay, it's something of a retread of The Impossible Planet, Satan Pit as a greatest hit, and that's a story I've got a lot of time for, but probably more for the gothic trappings of that than necessarily the nuts and bolts hard sci-fi sort of elements to it. And I started off thinking, well, this is just going to be The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit without Gabriel Wolf down a hole. It's going to be space under siege, but you're not going to have the joy of the ood, and because the flood and knots don't work. But the more I watched it, the more I got drawn into it by Lindsay Duncan and by, to be honest, the whole cast. I mean, you'd probably point to some weak links, but it's interesting because it's a story that relies on the fact that it has to rely on the Doctor's inaction throughout. It's very interestingly, it's an interestingly posed thing, and that the whole thing it has to do a good job of actually making us care for and relate to this crew of characters. And by the time, it felt like about 15 minutes. It probably is less than that, but the bit where basically Tennant is walking away from it, and the whole climax of it in terms of gradually picking them off one by one of the majority of the crew, apart from the couple of stooges at the start. That just plays out, and you're seeing it from Tennant's point of view, but you're reliant on we've got to engage with those characters, and I was thoroughly sucked into it. Really, it went up a lot in my estimation, or in my recollection.
Yeah, it definitely starts as one thing and ends as something else, doesn't it? And I think both halves are equally good. And I hadn't really appreciated quite how good it was as a piece the first time around, possibly because it threw me for a curveball with the change of tone. But I mean, it starts off as one of the best horror stories we've had in Doctor Who, I think. I found it genuinely unnerving in a way that I very rarely do with Doctor Who. It uses some, very often, Doctor Who has good, unnerving, horrific ideas on paper, but either can't or won't follow through because it can't, there's a limit how scary it's allowed to be. But they use the same directorial tricks here as they would if they were making this as a proper horror film. And there's one little moment, at the moment of the first possession, I can't remember the character's name, sorry, the first chap who gets possessed. He's in the background, going at his business, while the character in the foreground is talking to him, facing us. Yeah. And the way we first know something is wrong is just through something very subtle, movement. Yes. He's moving in an unnatural way. It's just quite a common horror. I wouldn't say trope again. Sorry. They did it in in It Chapter 2 fairly recently, and it made me squeal in the cinema watching it, and it had almost the same effect here. So. That was really very freaky. And then following through, the makeup is also very good. So yes, proper horror, but then as you say, quite early on, we're introduced the gimmick of the Doctor knowing. He often knows what's going to happen, but we've never seen it affect him the way it does here, and we spend half the story wondering why he's reacting this way. And then as to the explanation, it's all about the drama, as you've already explained. It's very effective dramatically, but we also get a rather good science fiction concept introduced the first time in Doctor Who, that of the fixed point in time. So really it's a win-win-win for me. And the through line of Lindsay Duncan's character holds it all together.
Yeah, if only they thought of that in Day of the Daleks rather than the Blinovich time limitation, or limitation effect, whatever it was, then yeah.
I mean, I feel like I can see it when they explain a fixed point in time. I'm picturing some nebulous web of timelines which can be bent and stretched, but they, like gravity, when you've seen a representation of gravity curving, space-time curving around a massive object, I feel like these fixed points in time are just stuck there, and everything else has to bend and shape.
I'm imagining one of those large sort of macrame pot holder things, as you're describing it.
That also works. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to say that it's pretty much exactly the same thing I say every time I watch a Doctor Who for this podcast, which is I haven't seen this one since it went out, and it's better than I remember it.
Oh,
I don't know what it is about my memory of Doctor Who stories, and why especially the modern ones, why I kind of didn't like them that much the first time round, and I think they're okay second time. But there we go.
What made you think you're a fan of this program? You seem to have hated it up until the point you started doing a podcast, and suddenly.
Yeah. I think. I mean, there have been some stories in the new series that I've loved at the time. But there seemed to be an awful lot that I kind of was ho-hum about, and then suddenly seem to be a lot more enthusiastic about now. Simon, we haven't heard your view on this.
The infected crew members, that was genuinely frightening. I like how their mouths went crusty. That reminded me of Ice Warriors, the way their faces went crusty. And also the screams were really chilling. And at a couple of points, that reminded me of Fury from the Deep with Oak and Quill.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
that was really good. And you've all picked up on it. It was fantastically well scripted, and a story that ran all the way, strong thread all the way through from the beginning to the end. And just when you're wondering when they were ever going to use those guns and defending themselves, it ultimately got put to an awful use at the end.
Yes.
So, Giles, you compared it to Satan Pit. Another one that's sort of... what other stories does it remind me of? I can't remember the name of it. What was the one with the ghosts in the underwater? Was there an underwater base in?
Oh yeah, Before the Flood, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh yes, yeah.
But what I'm
Toby Whithouse.
I know there are other examples. You'll be able to help me all because you're more awake than I am. But what we have here is a twist on Base Under Siege, and it hasn't got its own nicknames. I think we need to think it up. But it's the Base Under Siege from within. It's the enemy within, isn't it? We're trapped and the monster's in here with us.
Yes.
Which I always think back to Horror Fang Rock as one of my favourite examples of that.
Yes.
Terence.
Well, and I guess it's the thing, and yeah.
Yes, indeed, absolutely. It's the thing, isn't it? Okay, it's the thing. So the name for this subgenre is Doctor Who rips off the thing.
Yeah. It reminds me actually of Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall's vegetable patch when he discovers that the slugs, I think, the eggs of the slugs are already in the manure that you spread all over it.
Oh God, yeah, that was horrific, wasn't it? Just a nightmare fuel. God, I wet myself that time.
Mooching through his lettuces.
No.
Yes, I mean, it's the trouble often when you're watching a new series story, you do have to bear in mind. We didn't have to bear in mind, but you can't help thinking as a fan. You're thinking, well, this was written by another fan, and if something reminds me of something from Classic Who, that's probably not an accident. So yeah, I mean, the Fury for the Deep echoes, that could well be not deliberate, but subconscious on Russell's part. The fact that the makeup, we get a reference to Ice Warriors, the fact that makeup recalls Ice Warriors, I wonder if that was scripted, if that was what Russell had in his head. It's possible, because he is a very visual writer. He's a very visual man. He might well have drawn a little cartoon of what he wanted in the margins, for all we know. But it seems less likely that's the sort of thing that sort of callback would have occurred at any other point in the production process. He probably threw that in there as a sort of Easter egg. You can imagine that the Ice Warriors themselves might have been created, might have evolved as through some sort of mutation caused by this virus, which they then learned to live with.
Yes.
That's not really a very good dramatic point, so why... This isn't Star Trek, you wouldn't actually say that in the episode, but it's something we can think about in the privacy of our own homes.
Yeah. You have to wonder where all that water's coming from. I mean, they can certainly vomit out enormously large quantities of it.
It's space water. It's auto-regenerative.
Right. Yeah.
Bigger on the inside than the outside. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. Well, talking of the direction and so on, obviously this is, I believe, Graham Harper's sadly last contribution to the or latest contribution to the series. And once again, it makes you realise. Yeah, I wouldn't say some of his new series contributions didn't absolutely scream with the quality that some of his older his stuff in the classic series really stands out with. But yeah, it's good to see him. Certainly goes out on a high in that regard here. That he's really kind of feels like he's let off the leash. And did it go out on November 13th, 2009? Was that the actual air date in the end, or did it go out the day after? Or was it November 15th?
You mean the same date that's referenced in?
I'm just trying to think whether it's because
15th of November.
Yeah, and it was indeed aired on 15th of November 2009. So he must have known that a good way off. That was what they were going for. All the more interesting considering I think that was a Sunday, wasn't it? And this was the first. Wasn't it the first Sunday airing?
Oh,
at least possibly aside from Christmas specials, which obviously go out on whatever day.
Yeah, old Chris Chibnall must have been watching and saying, now there's a thing.
Now there's a thing. Now there's the thing.
Yes. Though it's certainly done some rather bigger results in terms of the ratings on this one, I think. Different time.
I don't know. I was reminded of that rotten episode we got this year, without wishing to drag things down. We've said enough. We've said enough good things about Waters and Mars without this feeling like I'm raising it with faint damnings.
Yeah.
But what was it called? Oh, never mind. Let's forget it existed. I mean, that was more Base Under Siege, wasn't it? Because the monsters were outside.
Yes.
Oh, I can't remember what the hell it was all about.
Oh, Orphan 55. Yeah.
Both what those two genres, Base Under Siege and Doctor Who rips off the thing. What they share is the creeping menace killing off the cast one by one, us getting to know and care about them. And this was done with great economy. In fact, I mean, it was in the old days the way you had to get this done was through entirely through dialogue and getting you to care about these people. But Russell cheats and puts up those little biographies at the beginning, showing us they're all going to die. So we care even before we know who they are, which is turning it on its head slightly. That's slightly more Moffat-y, actually, that extra
it's interesting.
Metatextual insertion.
It's interesting because that was that contributed to getting my back up at the start, making me think, okay, this is a cheat because in the Satan pit, yes, you knew what way it was going, and that they were going to be picked off one by one. In that case, I like the characterisation, and I mean, obviously, at least if rumours are to be believed, Russell had more than a hand in in that particular script in the end. So it was certainly. So perhaps this was just him thinking, well, I may as well do the same thing, and yes, get credit for it.
But he's also
take credit for it this time.
Something different.
Yes, yeah.
Because nobody likes to repeat themselves, and rather than just having you think, who's going to survive at the end, which is the usual way to build up tension. This time, he starts with the premise that they're all going to die.
No one's going to survive.
And then the tension is, surely you're not going to go through with that, are you? Because, of course, there are stories where everybody... Justice once rose, everybody dies. Like my favourite horror, Fang Rock, which is very dark for the 70s. Yeah. And here, he turns it on its head. You start from the premise that they're all going to die, so the twist is is not just how many people can you save, but after a certain point, can the Doctor save anybody? Will he have to walk away? Will he have to put his magic space-time principles above his inverted commas humanity?
Yeah.
Isn't it kind of semi-sequel to Fires of Pompeii?
Yes, yeah.
He's assuming that he can't save anybody because history. And Donna says, well, hang on a minute, take a step back. What difference is it going to make? Who's going to miss? Is that where the line comes from? You can't save everybody, but you can save somebody. Only better. Does he say that? And so
something like that,
I was waiting for a callback to that because he's already he's already been in the same position once.
Yeah.
Well, we do have a mention of it, and we did. Yeah.
Oh, I missed that bit. Sorry.
Yeah, there definitely is a mention that that Tennant in dialogue with
Pompeii,
with Adelaide.
Do you mean with the bit at the end where
mentions-
we hear certain various voiceovers? Some of that's
No,
Yeah,
no,
okay.
no. Tennant discusses it with Adelaide. I think in the bit over the
oh, he does.
when they're looking at the ice reservoir when he opens up to her, and which.
I was probably refilling my glass at that point.
But that reminded me of somewhat of pre-minded. Is that a word? Of Vincent and the Doctor. That thing of, you're going to die anyway, so why don't I? And in this case, tell you. In Vincent, it has he actually has the nerve to it goes one step further in terms of actually showing him his future or his legacy.
I always enjoy those because it still feels fairly fresh. They never did anything along those lines in the old series, and
No.
as long as they don't flog it into the ground,
Yeah.
I think it's always a good avenue for an interesting moral dilemma. And when you mix the moral dilemma with sound logic, I don't say sound science because it's not really science, is it? But as long as the internal logic of why you can and can't do these things is well thought through, that's when it's at its best.
I think Pompeii is referred to as a fixed point in time. I think that might come up.
Oh, is that where it comes from?
I
Okay.
think it comes up in that. It must come up in that story. I'm sure this story wasn't the first time we'd heard about fixed points in time.
Interesting. I just assumed it was because he makes such a big deal out of it. But But you're right. I mean, bear in mind, it's exactly the same point that occurs in Fires of Pompeii, I guess. It'd be a bit weird not to have brought it up there.
But I don't. I wouldn't criticise him for repeating it here because again, you're playing to a different audience from the weekly show because this was ostensibly a special, and okay, it's not Christmas special where we really have to think we're getting in a few million people that wouldn't only watch Doctor Who once a year, but still, I think you don't blame them for reiterating that. And it was a year and a half later, after all. It wasn't.
Yes.
It's hard to remember that, but of course, season 4 was 2008, and this was fag end of 2009.
It seems to me at the end, when the suicide happens, that it's a big step for Adelaide to take, in that she's given no sign up to that point that she's anything other than a survivor. And so it's interesting that she sort of decided in the course of that sort of minute and a half dialogue with the Doctor outside in the street that this is the way to solve the problem, and she acts decisively, I suppose, to do it. And I suppose she's got a hope that it's enough to solve the problem, that she dies regardless of where it is going to fix things.
Yeah. I think it's possibly the only slightly weak, contrived point in the episode for me, because the part of her decision which is based on the logic the Doctor's outlined, that not just her own descendants, but the whole future of humanity might change. If she doesn't die, that makes sense.
Yes.
But she seems to give equal weight to the idea that the Doctor, having made this decision, is a problem. And she's only just met him. When he says, I'm the Time Lord Victorious, and she's the Time Lord Victorious is wrong, that cannot be. She repeats it far too easily, that phrase, back to him. I think she's becoming a bit authorial there. She knows rather more than she should and is taking a rather more... Yeah, you know what I mean? A stance that's slightly outside, above and beyond what her character should be or could be feeling at that point. But there you go. Nothing's perfect.
Yeah, I mean, and I feel also that whole thing escalates very quickly. I mean, you can sort of see the madness happening inside Tennant's Doctor. So, I mean, I can sort of see how it comes about, but how he goes from no, I mustn't intervene, oh, I am going to intervene, and now I'm all powerful and mighty, and then equally within about 15 seconds, oh no, I've done the wrong thing and everything's a disaster. It's a remarkably sudden change in both directions, I suppose. But I mean, dramas like that, it is a bit heightened, isn't it?
Yes, well, I suppose as if you consider how what's the decision that's been made. Yes, it comes over very fast on the screen. But on the other hand, if he's decided to chuck all of his principles out of how all these ideas that he's lived by and assumptions he's made about the governing principles of the universe and so on. I guess one can forgive him for possibly going a bit mad with the power of the idea that well, why the hell did I let Adric die? As a for instance, but there's been plenty of cases where he's felt like it wasn't his, he wasn't able to intervene for one reason or another, and then equally getting going from that high, as it were, to a to suddenly being pulled up very short and realizing that it's an utter disaster what you've just done. It's I guess it's a bit overplayed perhaps, but then Tennant's Doctor is prone to big mood swings, isn't he?
And to some extent also he's made it more of a fixed point in time by telling her all about what's going to happen, assuming that she's going to die anyway, so it doesn't really matter, and then having saved her, he's already compounded the problem, I suppose.
Yes.
Silly Doctor.
Well, I mean, it's easy to stand on the outside and criticise someone else, isn't it? Yeah. Some people have got whole podcast careers on that basis.
Any more parallels between the two stories apart from the V word?
I mean, it's interesting. The whole virus thing is based on one line of dialogue, and it's even a little bit. Nobody says it's definitively a virus. The flood itself, of course, is only mentioned about once as well. But they sort of refer to it and said, well, it could be some kind of virus type thing in the water. I think it works because, again, there's that sort of that chain reaction. You've got the same thing in Invisible Enemy, where one person gets it and then they pass it, and before you know where you are, it's become a big problem. And I guess this too, it's just one bit of water that somebody fails to change the filter properly, and then one thing leads to another.
Yep, with a bit of re-editing, it could be a very useful public information film, couldn't it?
Indeed.
It's quite a Quatermassy, actually. It's just occurring to me just seeing you talk about it like that, I think. I was just thinking about the fact that we don't... Yes, we have monster... we have... like the transformed people are ersatz monsters, but we don't have a... I was just thinking about that scene when the glacier starts cracking open, and you don't get any revelation of what was really behind it or anything like that, which you're almost cued to expect when you get some scene of something vast cracking open. You're expecting something is going to emerge from it, but instead it's in the water, which is quite nice.
Russell often does that. Yeah, at his best, Russell picks up an idea the same as Midnight, really.
Yeah,
I prefer that to the centre of the earth has a massive spider living in it. You know what I mean?
Yes,
big ideas and little ideas and simple ideas. Simple ideas are always better than overcomplicated ideas. It's in the water.
Yeah.
The monsters look like water. They spread through water. I mean, again, sort of thing that Moffat made his career on.
Yes, here's the line. A viral life form held in the ice for all these years. It's a sort of speculation rather than a statement, as it sounds like. I've just read it out there.
See, Doctor Who can be anything, can't it? One week, if the story has a more scientific feel to it, it can be a virus. Another week, it could be something fantastical, like a thought-based life form, or a life form for another dimension, or an invisible enemy. The prawn that is within us all.
There's even that slightly mystical sequence in it with her meeting the Dalek as a child.
Yes, yeah.
Well, I mean, you could draw a parallel with a slightly mystical sequence of them finding a prawn in the middle of the mind-brain interface, but
that's a curious.
It does have a mystical air to it as filmed, but of course it's given a very rational scientific explanation. The Daleks have time travel themselves, as dangerous and reckless, and destructive as they are, wouldn't muck around with a fixed point in time. And it reminds one of the line from Remembrance of the Daleks. The Doctor says the same thing. Even the Daleks, ruthless as they are, would know better than to make such a radical alteration to the timelines. Which is kind of a throwaway line in Remembrance, but both occasion.
Cute robot. They both got a cute robot.
Oh, true. Yes.
You've only just thought of that. Well, I mean, I'm impressed that you're still able to come up with new ideas this time of night. Yeah, they do.
Yes, and there is a canine reference in...
Gadget.
There's a canine reference in Waters of Mars, isn't there?
Yeah.
Doesn't he say...
My goodness, it's overflowing.
Dog is... Yeah, dogs are different.
I'm surprised Bob Baker wasn't expecting some kind of payment there.
Yeah.
I did wonder if the line, it's a bit flimsy, isn't it, was added on set when they realised that the monster, that the robot was wobbling alarmingly, like that thing out of Sontaran Experiment.
He does like a big corridor, doesn't he? That's a very big...
That felt very reminiscent of a lot of other things, and I couldn't think of all of them. I think there's definitely one in Runaway Bride, but there are lots of...
Was it all filmed in the corridors underneath the atrium of the Millennium Stadium or whatever in Cardiff? Isn't that where you used to film a lot of that sort of thing?
Paul Graham Harper being asked to make scenes of people running look interesting. Uses a technique that I've only ever really seen in early New Who era. I've never seen it anywhere else. It's sort of cutting between torso and feet shots of people running to try and generate some excitement, and not really getting away with it. I just getting lots of coverage and then editing it to try and build up some pace, and not really. No, running isn't. Yes, I think I'm thinking of the bit with the segue from Runaway Bride, aren't I?
Oh yes, yeah.
But I can see why he puts these bits in. In old Doctor Who, when you had to get from base A to base B past the monster, you'd just walk down a 7-foot-long stretch of BBC studio. So he's trying to avoid it feeling pedestrian like that.
Any other thoughts, Simon?
No, I think that's nicely summed up and compared, Richard.
I thought it was quite funny at the end of Waters of Mars. You get this huge, great 2009 that comes. It's like this. And now, Christmas 2009. We're sort of coming to the conclusion, but now it just whatever, 11 years ago or 10 and a half. But I guess it was all building to a big thing in a month or two's time from the airing of this.
Absolutely.
It reminded me of I have to say I kind of watched that. I thought, blimey, I haven't seen End of Time since broadcast either. And I quite fancy them.
We should call it the I haven't seen this since it was broadcast podcast, really, shouldn't we? No, I forgot. God, it was massive, wasn't it? And that was they just took over the BBC that Christmas. Blimey. We shall not see that. We shall not see the lake again. June Whitfield it had in it. June Whitfield.
Oh yes, of course it did. Yeah.
Can you imagine? On Doctor Who.
Yeah. One slight downer though. I noticed. Old Adelaide mentions at one point the fact that they've gone through before going off to Mars, before reaching Mars. The fact humanity's gone through 40 years of chaos. And you kind of wind the clock back and think, yeah.
Well, yeah, that was another point actually that reminded me of Orphan 55, and I'm not going to be gratuitously rude about it this time, but you must remember that.
At least you remember the title.
Extraordinarily lengthy and on-the-nose speech the Doctor gives at the end. Whereas this gets the same point across much more economically about the dangers of rampant environmental destruction. And it's in terms of the plot. They had to go to Mars.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we could have had a bit of David Tennant at the end saying, and remember, children, don't play with fixed points at time. Because this is the sort of thing that happens. But perhaps not. Excellent. Well, I think we can keep on dribbling on for hours, but we've probably come to the end of anything that our listeners will want to hear. So I think
if you can
go on,
pluck out the best 30 seconds and tweet it, and maybe it'll go viral.
Yeah, it's ever been a pleasure and of course something of a therapy talking to you chaps this evening. So thanks for your presence here, and thanks to whoever suggested we should do a virus special, because it's been quite fun. And next time it's dinosaurs, wasn't it? Your idea, Giles, the Deserted London special or something.
Oh yes, yeah. Dinosaur invasion struck me as a
yeah.
Also strange the appetite.
We go with Turn Left for the sort of everything's going wrong special. But anyway, we'll work that out. Good. Okay. Well, I suppose we should say goodbye to our listeners in a usual faintly shambolic way.
Ta-da.
Goodbye, listeners.
Cheerio.
Bye. So, oh gosh. No, I've just sorry. I've got a terrible.
Here comes the fun bit, kids.
I've got a terrible joke to start us off with, but I'd forgotten how it went. So I'm going to have to. But now I've worked it out again. So here we go. So everyone, the invisible enemy. Was it a prawn cracker, or was it something you didn't really want on?
Bumtish.
Oh dear.
Oh.
Do you know what? I've lost count of the number of times I've heard you give a joke a build-up like that, but for once you came through. Well done, mate.
Oh dear. Well, it wouldn't have worked if I'd said it the way that I thought I was going to say it about a minute ago, and then I realised what the joke was. Hey ho. I was talking with my mate Stephen Shapansky. Actually, I was going to say it was my mate Stephen Shapansky, and then it turns out he's your mate Stephen Shapansky. So I said to him, well, so here there I was with my mate Paul Morris, and he was trying to encourage me to talk to Phil Morris, and he said, oh yeah, and I was talking with my mate Paul Morris, chatting with Paul Vanessa. So I thought, oh well, then that man he gets everywhere.